Switch places with me, and $1 million will be yours. The billionaire rasped to the homeless man standing at a damp, cold corner in New York. The homeless man froze, his cloudy eyes narrowing in disbelief. What did you just say? $1 million? You're messing with me, right? He stammered. But the man in the dusty suit wasn't joking. He looked straight at the homeless man, his eyes tired, yet unyielding, the eyes of someone who had lost too much in a single day. That man was Edward Miller, a 60-year-old billionaire known as one of America's greatest self-made icons. He had built Miller Tech from nothing, turning it into a major economic force in New York. His wife, Laura Miller, had passed away when their son was just 6 years old. Edward had raised his son alone, running a massive company with one hand and protecting his child like a priceless treasure with the other. And that treasure, Andrew Miller, 28, was the only reason Edward had kept going for over 3 decades. Andrew was handsome, smart, kind, and had once been Edward's greatest pride. Edward used to tell his friends, "The day I hand him the company will be the happiest day of my life." But life never moves according to our wishes. After graduating from a prestigious university, Andrew met and fell in love with a beautiful woman named Samantha Brooks. With sharp eyes, a sugary smile, and irresistible charm, Samantha captivated Andrew instantly. But with his seasoned insight, Edward saw what his blinded son could not: the greed behind her gaze, the overly practiced smile, the slyness beneath the innocent mask. Edward didn't oppose the relationship, but he knew better than anyone that the wrong marriage could destroy a person's life. He gently warned Andrew, "Take your time. Marriage is a serious choice. Don't let beauty cloud your judgment." But Andrew, caught up in a fiery romance, refused to listen. The once gentle, studious young man began spiraling into wild nights with Samantha's notorious circle of friends. He started missing meetings, neglecting important projects, and every passing day, Edward watched his son slip further away, his heart tightening painfully in his chest. He tried talking to him, tried stopping him, tried pulling Andrew back, but nothing worked. Eventually, when disappointment piled into agony, Edward did something no father ever wants to do. He hired a private investigator to look into Samantha. Soon, the truth surfaced, ugly and undeniable. Samantha wasn't just a gold digger. She had scammed multiple wealthy men before: businessmen, a restaurant owner, even a famous plastic surgeon. Edward understood. If he didn't act decisively, he would lose his son forever. And that desperation led him to the moment he stood before the homeless man, Jack Turner, uttering the words that would change both of their lives. "Switch places with me, and $1 million will be yours." The truth about Samantha Brooks was delivered to Edward Miller on a gray New York afternoon. A thick folder, its edges still smelling of fresh ink from the private investigator. Photographs of Samantha with her previous targets: an elderly businessman, a restaurant owner, a well-known cosmetic surgeon, each ending with the same fate: drained of money, tricked in love, left behind in bitterness. Edward didn't want to believe it. Not because he trusted Samantha, no. He feared that this truth would shatter Andrew's heart. But he had no choice. That evening, when Andrew returned home smelling of expensive perfume and alcohol, Edward was already waiting in the living room, holding the folder, his eyes red from sleepless nights. The warm yellow light exposed every wrinkle on his face like cuts carved by pain. "Andrew, we need to talk," Edward said softly, his voice hoarse but heavy. Andrew scoffed, tossing his jacket onto the chair. "You want to talk about Samantha again? I'm tired of this." "I'm not here to argue. I just want you to see the truth." Edward set the folder on the table. "This is what I found. You need to look at it." Andrew looked down at the folder, irritation rising. "You had her followed? You hired someone to dig through her private life?" "I only want to protect you," Edward whispered. "Samantha isn't who you think she is." Andrew's voice suddenly turned sharp. "Not who I think? What do you think she is? A gold digger? A bad woman? Do you have any idea how much I love her?" Edward tried to keep his pain buried. He gently opened the folder and revealed the photos, the bank statements, the testimonies from other victims. But Andrew didn't look. Instead, he laughed a dry, bitter laugh. "So this is how far you'll go to ruin my happiness? You don't trust me. You don't trust my choices." "It doesn't. It's not that I don't trust you, I just—" Edward never finished. Andrew exploded, something he had never done in his entire life. "I don't need you controlling my life. This is my decision." The shout stabbed Edward's heart like a blade. In 28 years, Andrew had never raised his voice at his father, let alone yell in his face. Andrew slapped the folder off the table. Papers scattered across the floor. He stepped back, eyes bloodshot. "I will marry Samantha, whether you like it or not, maybe ungrade." "Andrew!" Edward called out, voice breaking. But Andrew turned and stormed upstairs, slamming the door harder than he ever had. Edward stood in the silent room, shattered. The son he devoted his life to now looked at him like an enemy. A few days later, Andrew came downstairs in a crisp suit. His eyes were firm, breath unsteady, like someone about to leap off a cliff. "Dad," Andrew said, "I've made my decision. Samantha and I are getting married next month. You can come or not. But if you continue to oppose us, I'll leave. I'll walk out of your life." Silence thickened the room. Edward felt his heart being torn apart. He stared at his son, the little boy who once hugged him after falling off a bicycle, the child who used to cling to him after every school event, now standing there like a stranger poisoned by blind love. Edward exhaled, trembling. "If that's what you want, I won't stop you." End quote. Andrew smiled, relieved, hugged his father briefly, and left. But Edward felt no warmth in that embrace. The wedding was grand but cold. Samantha looked like a queen, glistening eyes, flawless smile, but beneath the beauty was calculation. Andrew glowed with naive happiness. Edward, sitting in the front row, watched his son exchange rings, his heart tightening. "My son, have I already lost you?" After the wedding, Samantha no longer hid her true nature. Her voice became commands. "You need to convince your father to hand over the company. You're the heir. You deserve it now. Your father's held power too long." And Andrew listened. One night, Edward overheard their conversation through the bedroom door. "You need to pressure him. I can't live in this house forever. I'm tired of being looked down on." When 9, it's beat. "But my dad, your dad is the obstacle in our lives. He's trying." "No, he's not trying anything. You're just a little boy following Daddy around." Edward's hand trembled. He had survived billion-dollar negotiations, corporate wars, yet nothing ever hurt like this. He understood now. Samantha was trying to rot the family from the inside. The next morning, Andrew and Samantha confronted Edward. "Dad," Andrew said, "we want to talk openly." Samantha folded her arms beside him like a ruthless attorney ready to strike. Andrew inhaled. "Either you hand over the company to me within 6 months, or I'll cut all ties with you." Edward was stunned. He stared at the son he had raised alone for almost 30 years, and no longer recognized him. "Andrew, someone is controlling you. This isn't you." "You're blaming Samantha again," Andrew shouted. Edward shook his head. "No, but you can't see you're being used." End quote. Samantha laughed coldly. "Mr. Miller, do you think everyone is after your money? Not everyone is as poor in spirit as you." Edward locked eyes with her, sharp, lethal, the gaze of a man who had faced Wall Street's predators. "What did you come to my son for? If not wealth, power, what else?" Samantha smirked. "You don't have the right to ask me that." Andrew stepped forward. "I said it already. If you don't hand over the company, I'm leaving. I won't be your son anymore." And Claist. Edward staggered back, his eyes hollowed by despair. He nodded slowly. "Fine. If that's what you want, I won't hold you back." Andrew grabbed Samantha's hand and left without looking back. The door clicked gently behind them, but to Edward, it sounded like the collapse of a lifetime of sacrifice. That night, Edward sat alone in his large home, suffocating. He stared at the chair Andrew once sat on as a child, at the photos of father and son fishing, each memory slicing into him. He finally understood. He had lost his son, not because of Samantha, not because of money, but because Andrew refused to see the truth. Edward had conquered countless corporate battles, but he was defeated by a two-year-old girl, the most painful defeat of his life, and in that moment his heart heavy as steel. Edward walked out into the long, dark streets of New York, a decision that led him straight to his fateful encounter with the homeless man, Jack Turner. That night, New York was covered in fog. The neon lights blurred in Edward Miller's eyes as he wandered through crowded avenues. For over 3 decades of dazzling success, he had believed there was nothing he couldn't fix. But this time, his heart was too broken to function. He walked endlessly until his legs went numb. And then, at a dark corner where the smell of garbage mixed with the icy air, Edward stopped. In front of him was a ragged man sitting against the wall, clutching a torn, thin coat. That man was Jack Turner, the homeless stranger Edward never imagined would cross paths with his life. Edward stood there for a long time. Under the dim streetlight, his face showed pure devastation and silent grief. Jack looked up, eyes tired and squinting. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough from the cold. Edward answered in a whisper, almost like the last breath of a man whose soul had fallen apart. "Switch places with me, and $1 million will be yours." Jack's eyes widened. He thought he misheard, but Edward hadn't misspoken. He stared at Jack with terrifying conviction. Who are you? $1 million? I'm not the guy to joke with," Jack stuttered. Edward sat down beside him, feeling for the first time the bone-deep cold of a street corner, far from the climate-controlled air of his glass offices. "That's the price," Edward said slowly. "For me to disappear from my own family, and for my son to finally see the truth." Jack still doubted him. But when Edward recounted everything, Samantha, the confrontation, Andrew cutting ties, Jack fell silent. After a long pause, Jack sighed, his eyes full of compassion. "You're richer than anyone I've ever seen, but you're hurting worse than all of us combined." And with that, the deal was made. Jack brought Edward to the slum where he lived. From that day, Edward lived as an anonymous homeless man. The next morning, as planned, his loyal secretary, Megan Hughes, the one Edward trusted most, spread the news across the company and the family. Edward Miller has gone bankrupt. Miller Tech has been taken over. All assets have been frozen. The luxurious Miller mansion turned eerily quiet. Andrew stared at the news report, his hands shaking. Samantha, standing behind him, gasped, eyes wide. "No way. He's staging this, trying to control us. A billionaire doesn't go bankrupt overnight." But days passed. Edward didn't return. No calls. No messages. No trace. It was as if he had vanished from the world. Samantha, deprived of the key to the fortune she longed for, grew frantic. She screamed, smashed things, and raged. "He thinks he can scare me? He thinks I'll accept being broke? No, I don't believe it." But fear had already crept into her voice. 3 days later, Samantha forced Andrew. "You need to find him, now. If your dad is truly broke, we lose everything." I'm worried about Dad too," Andrew whispered. "Worried about him?" Samantha shrieked. "You should worry about your future." A Prost. In the end, Andrew drove Samantha across the city, searching for Edward. When they reached the poor neighborhood, Andrew saw a familiar figure sitting on a cracked step. He froze. "Dad." His voice cracked like the last breath of a shattered heart. Samantha stepped forward, examining the homeless figure. "No way! He actually ended up like this?" Edward looked up. His eyes met his son's, and the world stopped. In Andrew's eyes, remorse erupted like a wildfire. But Samantha? Not even a flicker of pity. Instead, she smirked a crueler expression than anything Edward had ever seen. "You really are useless. Lost your company to competitors. Let your family become broke. Then she bent down, grabbed a torn garbage bag, and hurled it at Edward's face. Thud! The bag hit him hard, like the breaking of his last shard of pride. "Samantha! What are you doing?" Andrew screamed. She spun around and screamed back. "You think I married you for your pretty face? You're nothing without money. Let me make this clear. I want a divorce. I won't stay with a broke loser." And she strode away. No glance back. No remorse. Nothing. Andrew collapsed in front of his father, the man he had turned his back on. He cried. For the first time since his mother died, "Dad, I was wrong. I was blind. I treated you terribly. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." Edward stayed silent, watching his son with the eyes of a father who had waited months for this moment. But he couldn't hug him, couldn't say he forgave him, couldn't stay. The plan wasn't finished yet. So when Andrew ran to get something to clean the dirt off his father's face, he returned to find Edward was gone. Only the old torn coat remained on the steps. Andrew panicked. He searched everywhere, alleys, streets, every corner. He asked people, ran until he could barely breathe. But Edward had vanished like wind. A week passed. Samantha filed for divorce immediately, leaving Andrew completely broken. He barely ate, barely slept, barely spoke. He sat alone in the empty house, eyes hollow. He reread the news about his father. He stared at old photos, and each time, tears fell. He realized he had lost the most important person in his life. Then exactly 1 week later, the front door opened. Edward Miller walked in, wearing a clean suit, face shaven, hair neat, the confident aura of an American billionaire restored. Andrew shot to his feet, jaw-dropping, tears streaming instantly. "Dad, you're alive. You really came back." Edward smiled gently. "I never left you, Andrew. I just had to let you see the truth. There's where." Andrew threw his arms around him and sobbed like a lost child coming home. In that embrace, pain, regret, and the love of a family thought broken slowly healed. But they didn't know. This wasn't the end. An even darker shadow was waiting ahead. The moment Edward returned home, it was as if Andrew's dead soul had been revived. He wrapped his arms around his father tightly, tears streaming down the face of a man who had paid a devastating price for his blindness. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was wrong about everything." Andrew choked, his voice breaking. Edward placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his eyes gentle yet heavy with sorrow. "No, son. Sometimes a person has to hit the bottom of pain before they can realize where the light is." They stood there for a long time, in a house once cold but now warmed by forgiveness. When they finally sat down at the table, Edward explained the entire plan, how he became a homeless man, how Jack Turner agreed to switch places with him temporarily, how Megan spread the news of his bankruptcy exactly as instructed. Everything Edward did wasn't to get revenge, but to save his son. "I had no other choice, Andrew. You stopped listening to me. You only listened to her. If I didn't force you to see Samantha's true face, I would have lost you forever." Those words made Andrew cry again. He held his father's hands tightly. "Dad, I owe you my whole life, with their 7 prive." Edward gave a sad smile. "No, a parent doesn't need their child to owe them anything. All I want is for you to be safe." While father and son were mending their wounds, Samantha Brooks faced a storm of her own. After divorcing Andrew, she immediately sought another wealthy man, not for love, but for money. This time, she chose the worst possible target, Victor Kane, a notorious New York underworld figure, tattooed, violent, earning his fortune from illegal dealings. Samantha believed he was rich, powerful, and capable of giving her the luxury she thought she deserved. But Victor wasn't stupid. On the very first night, he saw it in her eyes, that bottomless greed. "You're here for my money?" Victor asked, voice like cold metal. Samantha smiled and slid her hand onto his shoulder. "I just want a man who appreciates women more than that stingy old Miller does." A single sentence, a single look, and Victor understood everything. She wasn't seeking love. She was a predator. When Samantha later discovered that Edward had returned as a billionaire and that the bankruptcy rumor was part of a plan, she went insane. He tricked me? He humiliated me in front of Andrew? Victor, I want him to pay. I want him gone, is the back. Victor looked at her with half amusement, half disgust. Gone? You think I'd do that for free? I can pay. With what? My beauty. You know what I mean. Victor raised an eyebrow. She was willing to sell her own body just to get revenge? This woman was more toxic than any drug. But Victor wasn't easily swayed. He smirked. I'll help you. But don't worry. I'll help you in my own way. At that moment, Samantha's fate was sealed. Victor Kane would never kill Edward. No, killing a billionaire was suicide. But selling a beautiful, foolish, greedy woman to an international trafficking ring? No investigations, no witnesses, no loose ends. A few days later, Samantha was drugged in Victor's living room. She woke up in a cold room, hands tied, mouth taped. Strange men spoke in a foreign language she didn't recognize. Victor stood in the corner, smiling like a man delivering a sentence. You wanted to destroy Edward Miller? You wanted to take revenge on life? Well, this is the price of greed, Samantha. The door shut. That was the last time the world ever saw Samantha Brooks. She vanished from New York. No one found her. No records. No online activity. In the underworld, they call it a road with no return. When rumors about Samantha spread around the city, Edward felt no joy, no satisfaction. He simply sighed. A person eventually pays for the way they choose to live. Andrew remained silent, hurt, but understanding that such an ending was unavoidable. Father and son spent months healing every fracture between them. They worked together, had dinner together, rewatched the old movies Andrew's mother once loved. Andrew changed. He became the hard-working young man he used to be. He respected his father. He appreciated life more. One day, Andrew asked, Dad, did you ever regret becoming a homeless man? Edward looked out the window where sunlight streamed in. Regret? No. If I had to do it again, I would. Sometimes, to save the person you love, you have to be willing to walk into the darkness. As for Jack Turner, the homeless man who switched places with a billionaire, the $1 million transformed his entire life. Jack rented a small apartment, got medical treatment, bought new clothes, started a decent job at a community center. He didn't waste the money, didn't disappear, didn't turn greedy. Every day, Jack told people about the mysterious man who had changed his destiny. He didn't just give me money, Jack said. He gave me a chance to be a good man again. And so, after all the chaos, betrayal, and darkness, the Miller family found their way back to each other, not because of wealth, not because of power, but because of father and son love. The only thing that never abandons you, if you know how to return. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and listening to this story. We truly appreciate every single one of you who chooses to be here, to follow the journey of our characters, and to share these emotional moments with us. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you more meaningful content. We would also love to hear your thoughts. What part of the story touched you the most? What lesson did you take away from Edward and Andrew's journey? Feel free to share your opinions, reactions, or even your personal experiences in the comments section below. Your voice helps shape the future stories we tell on this channel. Thank you again for being part of our growing community. Stay safe, stay inspired, and we'll see you soon in the next story.